Hello everyone, wishing you a wonderful day. Today, we're diving into a shocking twist. While Yuri leaves for an overseas business trip, Lin secretly breaks the no-contact deal and returns with a dangerous plan to take Mrs. Nghia's entire fortune for revenge. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next videos. In the soft morning light draped over the farm, Ly Tu Tieu and Yuri stood close together, side by side, smiling the kind of smiles that tried to pretend everything was fine, even when both hearts already knew it wasn't. The air smelled like dew on leaves and warm smoke from the kitchen, but underneath it was that quiet ache that only shows up when someone you love is about to leave. Tu Tieu moved with careful hands, stirring a small pot on the stove. The ginger jam bubbled gently, thick and golden, and she tasted it once, then nodded like she was sealing a promise inside that jar. She poured it neatly, wiped the rim, screwed the lid on tight, and carried it out as if it was something precious. "Here," she said, holding it out to Yuri. "Ginger jam. If your throat feels scratchy or if the weather turns cold, you take a spoon, don't ignore it." Yuri chuckled softly, but his eyes didn't laugh the same way. "You're treating me like I'm going to freeze to death over there." "I'm treating you like you're someone who forgets to take care of himself when he's busy," she shot back, and her voice was light, but her gaze was serious. Yuri took the jar with both hands like he understood the weight wasn't about the jam. "Thank you. I'll keep it in my carry-on. I won't let it get crushed." Tu Tieu nodded, then quickly turned back toward the bench, rummaging through a small bag as if she suddenly remembered something urgent. She pulled out a scarf, warm, thick, and new. The kind that still held its shape. The kind that smelled faintly of clean fabric and home. "And this," she added, draping it over his arm before he could protest. "It's cold on planes, and it might be cold where you're going. You have to wear it." Yuri blinked at it. "I already packed." "Don't argue," she cut in immediately, the way only someone who loves you can. "At home I have so many warm clothes you bought for me. I haven't even worn them all yet. So if you don't take this scarf, it's like you wasted your money. Understand?" That made him laugh, just a short breath. But it cracked something open between them. He stared at her, then looked down at the scarf again, and finally nodded. "All right," he murmured. "I'll wear it." For a moment the two of them stood there quietly, the morning moving around them like nothing important was happening, even though for them it felt like the whole world was shifting. Then Tu Tieu reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Thin, worn at the edges. Her fingers held it tightly like she was afraid if she loosened her grip she'd lose courage. Yuri's expression changed instantly. "Tu Tieu, what is that?" "It's my savings," she said quickly before he could stop her. "Not much, but you take it. Consider it an investment in the new company." Yuri's face hardened with refusal. "No, absolutely not." "Yuri," she insisted, stepping closer. "Listen, it's not charity. It's not me giving you money like I'm above you. I'm putting it into our future. When the company grows, when things go well, you can return it. Or you don't return it. I don't care. I just want you to have enough to breathe." Yuri shook his head again, firm. "You worked hard for that. You need it. And you think I don't know that?" Her voice trembled just barely. "You think I don't know what it feels like to count money and still be scared? That's why I want you to take it." Yuri tried to push it back into her hand, but she refused to accept it. Her eyes were shining now, stubborn and sad at the same time. "Yuri," she whispered, and somehow that one word sounded like a plea, like a promise, like a prayer. He froze. Because when someone looks at you like that, like they're handing you the last warmth they have, you can't keep refusing without breaking them. So Yuri finally took the envelope, slowly, reluctantly, like it burned his palm. He slid it into his inner pocket and pressed it there, as if to keep it safe with his heartbeat. "Fine," he said quietly, "but I'm returning it. I promise." Tu Tieu nodded quickly, pretending that was the only thing she needed to hear. Then she forced a small smile and started fussing again, straightening his collar, checking his bag strap like a mother, like a wife, like someone trying to memorize every detail before it disappears. "You eat properly," she warned. "Don't skip meals, don't live off coffee." Yuri raised his hand in surrender. "Yes, ma'am." "And you sleep," she added. "Yes, ma'am. And when you arrive, call me." "I will call the moment I land," he promised, "and I'll arrange my work so I can come back early. I'm going for us, not for me." The words were strong, but the goodbye was stronger. Uri stepped back, shifting the bag onto his shoulder. Ginger jam, scarf, envelope. All of it pressed against him like pieces of home trying to travel with him. "Tu tieu," he said softly. "Don't be sad." She swallowed, nodding again, but her eyes were already wet. Uri turned quickly, too quickly, because if he slowed down, he knew he might not leave at all. He walked away with fast steps, not looking back until he was far enough that his face wouldn't betray him. Tu Tieu stood there, frozen in the morning light, watching the space where he'd been. The farm looked the same, the trees still, the air still mild, but inside her, the quiet felt like an entire room had emptied. And yet, behind the ache, there was hope, a thin beam of sunlight cutting through cloud, a promise of return. But far from that warmth, on the same farm where love had just said goodbye, another voice shattered the cold air like a stone thrown into calm water. "Lin!" The call was loud, impatient. Lin stepped out, her expression already sharp, eyes scanning the yard. "What? Why are you yelling like that?" Her friend walked in with a grin that didn't reach the eyes. "Relax. Sit down. I came because there's something happening today." Lin narrowed her gaze and motioned toward a chair. "Say it." The friend leaned closer. "Have you heard yet?" "Heard what?" "Yuri left. He went abroad for work." The moment those words landed, Lin's mouth curled, not into surprise, but into satisfaction. "Good," she said simply, like she'd been waiting for that door to open. Her friend nodded, pleased. "Exactly. Now the house is wide open. Mrs. Nghia is home alone." Lin's fingers tapped against her knee, slow and calculating. "So?" The friend's voice dropped into a whisper. "So we take everything." Lin's eyes flicked up. "Everything? All the shares, all the assets, the whole company?" The friend spoke like they were discussing a simple errand. "If we move now, it's easy. Mrs. Nghia is old, emotional, alone. Too easy to guide, too easy to trick." Lin's expression hardened, and for a second you could see something dark behind her stare. Resentment, hunger, old grudges wrapped in fresh ambition. "And you have a method?" Lin asked. The friend's grin returned. "Of course, come here." They leaned close, whispering like snakes under winter leaves. The farm's cold wind slid through the yard, brushing past them like a warning that neither of them cared to hear. As the plan unfolded in hushed tones, Lin's face didn't soften once. Not a flicker of guilt, not a tremble of hesitation. Because in her mind, she wasn't doing something wrong. In her mind, she was taking back what she believed should have been hers, and the cruelest part. She'd already broken the no-contact agreement, the Ket Kong gap mat. She'd flipped it like it meant nothing, shamelessly rewriting the rules. "I didn't say I wouldn't meet anyone," she'd justify later with a cold smile. "I said I wouldn't meet Lan. Only Lan." And now she was back, not to apologize, not to make peace, but to steal, to destroy, and to get revenge, using Mrs. Nghia's company as the knife. The friend finished whispering and leaned back. "So? Good plan, right?" Lin nodded slowly. "Good." Then she waved her hand dismissively. "You go handle your part. I'll deal with Antoine." The friend's eyes lit up greedily. "And the reward?" Lin didn't blink. "If it's done, you'll get more. Don't worry." The friend stood, satisfied. "That's what I like to hear." When they left, the farm returned to silence, but not the peaceful kind. It was the silence before a storm, the kind that feels thick, like something ugly is about to walk through the door. And somewhere far away, Yuri was heading toward a flight with hope in his chest, not knowing that behind him, someone was already reaching for his family's foundation with dirty hands. At the corn garden, the stalks stood tall and golden, heavy with harvest, their leaves rustling as if whispering secrets to the wind. The air was busy the way it always gets when someone is about to leave, when time starts pushing people forward whether they're ready or not. Uri stood near the edge of the field with another person, his work partner. Both of them dressed for travel, bags strapped, eyes scanning the road like they could will the minutes to slow down. "You're late," the other person teased, checking the time again. "I've been waiting a while." Yuri let out a breath and shook his head. "I wasn't late. I was delayed." He didn't say why. He didn't say he'd stood in the morning light holding back the urge to turn around and run back to Tu Tieu. He didn't say goodbye. It felt like ripping a bandage off skin that wasn't healed. Instead, he tightened his grip on his bag strap and nodded toward the road. "Come on," Yuri said. "We need to go in and do procedures. If we waste time, we'll miss the flight." The other person's expression shifted into seriousness. "Right. This trip is important." They started walking. Their steps were quick, their pace sharp, like men chasing the edge of a cliff before it fell away. As they passed between rows of corn, the breeze followed them, brushing the leaves against each other so they sounded like soft applause. But it didn't feel like celebration. It felt like a farewell from the land itself. "This time abroad," the other person said, voice low but steady, "we need to learn as much as we can. Real experience, real connections. If we do it right, the company will grow fast." Yuri nodded, eyes forward. "That's the goal." Then, after a beat, he added more quietly, "We're not just building a company, we're building a future." The other person glanced at him. "For you and Tu Tieu?" Yuri didn't answer directly. He only tightened his jaw, but his eyes softened for half a second, enough to reveal the truth. "Yeah," he admitted, "for us." They kept walking. The pressure of the flight time hovered above them like a countdown clock. Excitement and anxiety mixed inside Yuri like two rivers colliding, one rushing toward opportunity, the other pulling him back toward home. The cornfield behind them looked ripe and full, ready for harvest, like a symbol of what could happen if they worked hard enough. But the harder they walked forward, the more Yuri felt the invisible thread stretching behind him, tied to one person standing alone on a farm. And he didn't know, he couldn't know, that while he was walking toward the gate, Lin was walking toward betrayal. At the market, the cold air was sharp, but the crowd was lively. Voices layered over each other, the sound of bargaining and laughter blending with the scent of grilled corn. Smoke curled into the air, warm and sweet, the aroma strong enough to make hungry people stop mid-step. Ly Tu Tieu stood at her spot, hands moving quickly, weighing corn, bagging it, smiling politely. She sold it for 10,000 VND per kilogram. Cheap enough that customers felt they were getting a bargain, but still enough to help keep the farm running. The first customers came early. "Ko oi, give me 3 kilos. 5 kilos for me. Pick the big ones." Tu Tieu worked fast. Her palms warm from handling the hot corn, her cheeks flushed from the grill. She smiled, nodded, thanked each person, but her eyes kept drifting away like she was searching for someone who wasn't there. Usually Yuri would be nearby, carrying bags, teasing her, stealing a bite, acting like he didn't care while clearly caring too much. But today, there was only empty space beside her, and the emptiness followed her like a shadow. Not far away, Nghia arrived, looking more tired than usual. Her shoulders seemed heavier, her steps slower. She tried to hide it, but exhaustion has a way of showing itself in the eyes. A grandchild, young, quick, familiar with her routine, noticed immediately. "Nghia," the grandchild said, hurrying over. "Why do you look so tired?" Nghia forced a smile. "Last night I stayed up handling company matters. Too many things to sign, too many calls, so today I'm a bit tired. But it's okay." The grandchild frowned with concern. "Then you can't just stand here like that. Wait, let me make you coffee." Nghia hesitated. No, you don't have to. I want to, the grandchild insisted, already moving. A few minutes later, a steaming cup was placed into Nghie's hands. The warmth seeped into her fingers immediately. Drink it, the grandchild urged. It'll wake you up. Nghia smiled faintly and took a sip. Her eyes closed for a second, like she could finally breathe. She murmured. It's delicious. The grandchild brightened. Really? It suits you? Yes, Nghia said, nodding. Very much. The market noise surged around them again, but for a brief moment, that warm cup of coffee felt like a small shelter against a much bigger storm. Meanwhile, Tu Tieu's corn sold fast. In less time than she expected, the bags were gone, the grill quieting, the last customer waving as they left. She had done her work. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt the ache again, because finishing early meant going home to a farm that felt too quiet. And then, a loud voice cut through the air like a blade. Nghia, oi! Nghia! Everyone turned. The voice wasn't friendly. It wasn't playful. It was full of determination, hard, sharp, and bitter. Nghia froze mid-sip, coffee still warm in her hands. Her eyes widened slightly as she recognized the tone even before she saw the face. A figure stepped forward. Posture straight, gaze fierce. I'm only here to take back what belongs to my family, the person declared, loud enough that the nearby stalls went quiet. Those things were never under your ownership rights. You should have returned them a long time ago, not wait until today, forcing us to do this. The words landed like stones. Nghie's mouth parted slightly. She looked like someone who'd been slapped without warning. The person continued, voice rising with years of frustration packed into every sentence. That's all you deserve. You already got what you deserved. Now it's time to give back what you took. The air thickened. The cold wind that had been harmless moments ago now felt sharp, like it carried judgment. People whispered, "What's happening? Who is that? Why are they yelling at Nghia?" Tu Tieu stepped closer instinctively, her heart tightening. She didn't fully understand the details, but she understood one thing. This wasn't just a simple argument. This was a confrontation that had been building for years. Nghia swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure, but her hands trembled around the coffee cup. You shouldn't speak like that in public, Nghia said, voice strained. We can talk somewhere else. But the other person didn't soften. If anything, they looked more determined, like they'd waited too long to be polite. No, they snapped. Talking is finished. Today, I'm taking back what's ours. And in that moment, the scene didn't feel like a market anymore. It felt like a battlefield, one where money, pride, and old wounds were all pulling the strings. What nobody in that crowd knew was that Lin's conspiracy was already moving in the shadows. This public confrontation, this pressure, this humiliation was exactly the kind of crack that people like Lin planned to exploit. Because when someone is cornered, tired, emotional, and alone, that's when the trap closes easiest. Later, when the market finally began to settle, Tu Tieu returned to the farm. The moment she stepped onto the yard, the emptiness hit her all over again. No voice teasing her, no footsteps behind her, no Yuri. The farm didn't feel like home today. It felt like a place that was missing a heartbeat. Tu Tieu set her things down slowly, then stood still, staring at the space where Yuri usually sat, where he usually leaned against the doorframe, where he would usually ask her, "Did you eat yet?" Her throat tightened. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "I wonder if you've boarded the plane already." She missed him so much it felt ridiculous, like her chest was too small to hold all that longing. Still, she forced herself to work. She lit the grill, placed corn on it, and watched the kernels darken slightly, turning chewy and fragrant. The smell rose into the air, warm and sweet. And that's when it hurt even more, because Yuri would love this. He always liked her grilled corn the most, especially when she brushed it with a little honey. Tu Tieu stared at the corn and muttered softly, "When you come back, I'll harvest more. I'll cook for you. I'll make all the dishes you like." She tried to smile, but it came out shaky. She drizzled sugarcane honey over the corn, the scent spreading like comfort. Then she looked toward the house again, imagining Yuri sitting at the table eating beside her. "If you were here," she whispered, "I'd be so happy." The loneliness wrapped around her like cold fog, but she fought it by doing what she always did: cooking, sharing, giving warmth even when she felt empty. She called everyone over, offering the corn, trying to make the farm feel alive again. And at the end, she faced forward like she was speaking to someone far away. "Thank you for staying with me," she said softly, voice gentle. "I hope you enjoy watching, and I hope Yuri's work trip ends early so he can come home safe." The flames flickered, reflecting in her eyes like small, fragile hopes. But somewhere out there, a plane was taking off, a conspiracy was unfolding, and the farm, quiet and warm on the surface, was standing right at the edge of a storm that hadn't fully arrived yet.